Today's episode of Vice Versa, we're talking about GM releasing the last of the gasoline V-Series, Elon Musk getting the CEO of Robinhood to spill the beans about GameStop, VW's ID.6 electric SUV leaks, and much more. And as usual, I'm joined by Ricky Roy. How you doing, Ricky?
Good, Matt. It's been a kind of a crazy week. I had a little issue with my YouTube video while I was editing, but yeah, not bad. How about you? What'd you do this week?
Usual stuff. I'm just stuck at home releasing videos. Just put a video out this week about the vertical gardening, vertical farming. It's really kind of a fascinating thing that they can do right now with that kind of stuff. And that's like, I really hope that kind of catches on more.
Very good video. I haven't seen it yet, but I have a bookmark. I'll check it out. My video this week was on the Apple car and what it means. Are they going to make it? It's kind of a bizarre story, so I wanted to kind of give my 2 cents on it. So yeah. Good week. Should we jump right into it?
Let's jump right into it.
Okay. This one is, I was reading, I'm a big car person. I don't know how many people know that, but huge car guy before EVs, and now I'm all about EVs. But Cadillac is potentially creating the last of their very special black wings, which is a very special trim of their V-Series, which is like the BMW AMG kind of equivalent. So what's interesting here is we are looking at the end of an era. So there was a time when, 400 horsepower and the CT5, 600 horsepower, those numbers sounded amazing, like beyond belief. Now it's kind of a yawn. It's like, okay, boring. My $50,000 very economy reliable Model 3 Performance is putting out 500 horsepower. So the craziness of runaway performance numbers. And I want to quickly just read a paragraph. So here's a paragraph I thought was really apropos. And even in their case, the appeal will be like that of an analog watch, objects of mechanical fascination. On that front, the new Blackwing looks good. When you bring your 2022 CT5 Blackwing in to a 2040 car and coffee, you'll be talking about its titanium intake valves and its 4-lobe Eaton Supercharger and its aluminum cylinder heads. So it's kind of funny, but we're looking at cars that 30 years from now are going to be thought of as antiques and kind of the last of their lineage. This is especially interesting because if you're going to build a performance car going forward, it cannot have a gasoline engine. It'll just be too horridly slow. It just won't work. So welcome to the final iteration, the final chapter of the gasoline car. That's kind of the way I look at this. And we've had some nice ones. We've had some fast ones. They're just on their last leg. So that car, by the way, has a manual transmission. So for anybody who loves gas cars or manual transmissions, go out and get one of these. This will be the last of its kind.
Yeah, when I read this, when you put this article in and I read it, the first thing that popped in my head was smoke them if you got them, because it's like they're gonna be going away. They're gonna become antiques and collector's items. It's kind of weird to start wrapping my head around that. Like we're starting to see that happening now. You read something from it. There was another passage that jumped out at me that I earmarked that I wanted to read, which was, but if we're on the verge of seeing 1,000 horsepower trucks right now, ponder where we'll be once the horsepower race is decoupled from fuel economy and emissions considerations, from the constrictions of intake and exhaust and fuel flow, from the need to keep hundreds of precisely arranged components from flying apart. The game is going to change in a way that we're not yet calibrated to understand. I thought that was this article was so well written. I love so much of this article. And to me, that just summarized the whole thing so well to me. It's like, when you think about the complexity of internal combustion engines, it's kind of a miracle of engineering, what we're able to do and how much power we can harness from that. But at the same time, it seems so antiquated with what we can do with electric motors, and they just smoke these cars again and again. And the article just brought up how Pikes Peak, the record holder for Pikes Peak is an EV now from VW. It's like there's just so many of these records that are being broken by EV after EV after EV. It just illustrates it's actually for that kind of thing, it's the better technology, but it still has to catch up on other aspects like charging infrastructure and the ease of use. There's still some areas where it has to catch up, but we're at that turning point right now.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked about this in the past, but the end of the gas engine has been here for a while. If you look at horrible compromises like the CVT, which I cannot stand, cars that have the continually variable transmission. It's this rubber band transmission that just doesn't give you any kind of feedback. And superchargers and turbochargers, all in the interest of like smaller and smaller displacement, which when you're not flooring it, there's less fuel and air mixture and it'll get better economy. And when you need it, you floor it and all that boost. But the reality is all those cars don't get very good fuel economy. So historically, my dream has always been, I want a car that I can just cruise on the freeway and get like 50 miles a gallon. And then when I want to, I can floor it and have a race car. Was not possible. And now I literally have that in my garage. Yeah. I have a car that can go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, and all the rest of the time costs less than a Toyota Prius.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible.
No kidding.
Which actually takes us to the next story, which is actually the beginning of kind of a series of stories, which you'll start to see a thread with what we're about to talk about. So this one is Elon Musk getting the Robinhood CEO to kind of spill the beans on what happened with the whole GameStop kind of fiasco that happened over the past couple of weeks or about a month. And I got to call out Gally from Hyperchange. If you haven't seen his videos where he's talked about the GameStop stuff and the Robinhood kind of fiasco, I highly recommend going to watch his videos. He does a wonderful breakdown of Robinhood you are not the customer, you're the product, and the actual customer are the hedge funds that are kind of funding behind the scenes. So it's an interesting take on when you understand that the whole story about GameStop and what Robinhood did kind of starts to make more sense. But what's fascinating about this specific story is that Elon Musk went on the new social media platform called Clubhouse, which is basically just kind of like real-time podcasting or radio shows. It's just kind of like impromptu little rooms that people can jump into, and you can kind of have a audio chat in real time and bring people on stage and ask questions. It's really, really, really cool platform. I've been having a lot of fun with it. Elon came on and had one of these rooms and was talking to a bunch of people and answering questions, and they ended up pulling in the CEO of Robinhood, who also happens to be related to the whole Clubhouse thing. So there was probably a back room conversation between all of them, and they probably all know each other and are friends, which is why it happened. But Elon asked some very pointed questions about why the hell did Robinhood stop trading GameStop? And it turned out that Robinhood their arms were kind of tied because they were suddenly forced to try to raise $3 billion of funding to cover all of these sales, like in the middle of the night. And so they had to suddenly stop allowing people to buy it because they couldn't actually cover it because they had to have $3 billion like immediately. Raises a whole bunch of questions about their liquidity as a company, that if something like this can happen and take them out, do they really have enough funding to be able to do what they're doing? Are they solvent? It raises a whole bunch of questions. And it also then raises the question of who out there was forcing them to suddenly do $3 billion and why? And so there's a whole bunch of hinky activity in the background that's going on. And I just thought it was really fun that Elon was kind of like spearheading this conversation in a very public way. What did you think?
Yeah, exactly. You didn't mention the name of the series, but this whole week, as we were preparing our stories, I kind of felt like Elon Musk is basically the supreme overlord and supreme commander of Earth. His weight is unbelievable at this point. He can come in and just send a message, like a tweet, and change the direction of the Earth's rotation or something. But yeah, so he's on Clubhouse, which now is this huge platform. It's been private. They're not really out of their open beta. But he goes on there and says he's going to be on that Happy Time show on Clubhouse, and suddenly their servers are overloaded with all these people joining and stuff, which we could have probably predicted. But yeah, he's holding Vlad, the CEO of Robinhood, to some kind of account and kind of talking to him about this stuff, which he's the CEO of a car company. What is the connection? But that's kind of the clout he has at this point. Your point, which was very good about Robinhood's customer, comes to mind. But yeah, Elon basically kind of talked for us people. I use Robinhood actually for a small part of what I do, and they had to kind of answer for this. Like, how are you blocking people from buying or selling securities? Which sounds like a kind of crazy thing. We can talk. I have a channel where I've talked about this a little bit in my channel, but crazy stuff. And at least Elon is there kind of holding people to account, which I think is cool. But as far as watch Galley's videos. We'll put links or something. But
Yeah.
crazy week if you're an investor.
Yeah, it's like I said, this is the trend of the next few stories of the power of Elon is essentially what these next few stories are all about. So you want to take the next one?
Yeah. So the next one is Elon shares his optimism for the new U.S. administration. And this, I wanted to cover this one because if I had to categorize Elon's kind of political views, I'd say he's a little bit of a libertarian. I think he kind of believes in kind of a hands-off government approach. So I was happy to hear that he's in favor of the Biden administration. It's interesting because clearly it benefits him and his companies. Like his companies are all kind of in this world, in this space. And so I'm glad to hear that, he's got optimism. And I think this lends itself really well for future investment and stuff. Again, to the point about Elon, the supreme commander of Earth, if he's optimistic about things, I think that carries a lot of weight in terms of like investing capital and where it goes. Does it go into more EV companies? There's a ton of stuff. Like Arcimoto is a company that I've been investing in for a while, just blowing up lately. And so there's just a lot of excitement. And I think it's just a positive a window or a preview of the next 4 years.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised in the article it mentioned how in the interview with him, he had said he hasn't reached out to the Biden administration yet. I would have expected him to be like on the phone almost immediately telling them, you got to do this, this, and this. But it's interesting that he's kind of staying back, seeing how things play out. And I hope he does get in touch with them soon. But he did mention like all the people that the administration is reaching out to hire and bring in. He actually knows a lot of these people. The people at Tesla are very well connected to a lot of these people that are being brought in. So that may be part of the reason why he doesn't feel an urge to reach out right now, because they know all the players that are involved and what's shaking out. One thing I did want to bring up is we've talked about this before where Biden signed that executive order saying, federal cars are going to start buying EVs to replace their fleet. And we speculated, wonder if Tesla will be part of that or it's going to be mainly GM and Ford. I had a viewer reach out to me and sent me a link to the actual executive order. And he cited in the executive order, section 205 EV. In that section, one of the requirements is you have to buy from companies that have unions. And Tesla is a non-union company right now. So no Tesla, the way the executive order is currently written.
Wow, that's sneaky.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's going to be all Ford and GM, most likely.
So this is part of why I was surprised and excited is he doesn't have Joe Biden's views or like largely Democratic views. He's an anti-union person and other things that kind of seem like they could potentially be in conflict. So I'm glad that there's some symbiosis and some positivity. I think that'll be a good thing for the entire industry.
Yeah.
Thank you to Gary, by the way, for his super chat. I really appreciate it. He mentions if Elon requires cell fabs to sell cells to non-Tesla customers and if they pay a higher revenue and stuff. I think I wouldn't expect Tesla to sell batteries to anybody else until they're far more mature and they're like building all the cars they need to and they have excess supply. Until then, I think they're keeping everything possible for themselves.
Yeah, I would think the same thing. So next up is this one I just found, I don't know why I find this adorable. I think it's because I think Sandy Munro is just the coolest guy on the planet. I want to keep him in my pocket. I just think he is the coolest guy. He's so smart. He's so astute in his takes on things and how he's been breaking down all of the Teslas and being very honest about his takes on the problems with it. This conversation, if you haven't seen it, everybody should just go out and watch it. It's like 40 minutes long and it is spectacular. It's a great conversation of watching two engineers basically just kind of geek out and talking to each other. And they go so far down the rabbit holes in certain aspects of the way the cars are built and the way they both think cars should be built. And they actually are very much in alignment on things. Because Sandy Munro has talked numerous times about how he's been trying to get car companies to do this like unibody construction and use these gigantic molds and everything to make cars. And that's exactly what Elon's starting to do. So it's like he is super excited to see a company actually doing something that he's been trying to get people to do for a long time. So it's really, really cool. I thought this was a very fun watch. Strongly recommend it.
I've been watching more Munro live lately, and yeah, we'll have to put a link to it. You got to check it out. It's super cool. And like you said, part of why I think I like to hear Elon talk is he really embraces the engineer in him.
Yeah.
I was reading somewhere that like even when he puts down like job title, he puts engineer. That's how much he thinks about it.
Yeah.
So when you hear him talk, you get to hear him think about the things that matter, as opposed to a lot of CEOs who don't care about the nuts and bolts of it. They're like, go build it. I don't care. I'm worried about like how can we increase margins by 8% and ink out a little more sales and stuff. He really cares about the products that he's making, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So next up.
The next one, the Supercharger factory.
Yes.
Yes. So Tesla is slated to open up a new supercharger factory in China. So traditionally, they had been making their supercharger stalls in Fremont, California, for the version 2 superchargers. And as they went to the V3 model that has a faster 250 kilowatt architecture, they started building those in the Gigafactory in Albany. And so that's where they've been up until now. This new one is poised to be a really big deal because China is a massive country and a massive customer and a future stronghold for Tesla. And so this will dramatically increase their output of superchargers, because currently they have about 20,000 chargers installed, it says, and this new factory is poised to be pumping out about 10,000 a year. So huge scales of improvement in terms of output. And it should be a welcome side of news for people who have Teslas in congested areas in China and want more charging infrastructure.
Yeah, that to me was the key out of the entire thing of Tesla has about 20,000 superchargers, and we all talk about how they're the most, widely available supercharger network in the world. And it's like, here's a factory that can produce half of that in a single year. It's just,
yeah, no kidding.
It puts into sense the scale of the potential rollout that they'll do. It doesn't mean that they will be doing this right off the gate. They're probably gonna have to ramp up to that. And there's gotta be a lot of logistics about even installing that many. So who knows how quickly they'll actually be rolling them out, but the fact that the factory can actually pump out that many, it means the supercharger network is going to get a lot more vast, a lot faster. It's going to be like exponential growth for the supercharger network, which is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm glad it's the V3 stuff. I think their rollout with V3, upgrading from V2 is progressing faster than I thought. When I first got my Model 3, the very first V3 was unveiled in Las Vegas, and we did a little road trip to go check it out. This is before COVID. We had no idea it would be our last, but that was our first one. And now we go to several on our route between here and the Bay Area, and they're rolling out at a quick clip. One of the things that maybe you don't know, the V2 stalls, like if you have two stalls, A and a B, so you have like stall 4A and B, they shared the output. So if you had a car charging on A and you pulled into B and plugged in, you guys would be splitting the potential output, and as a result, your charge rate would be lower. With V3, they go and have a dedicated stream for each stall, so you don't have that issue any longer, and plus the 250 kilowatt speeds. So for people who drive a lot, and there are some, you mentioned Clubhouse, I was on a couple of calls where people were talking about supercharging and kind of geeking out, and there are some people who drive like thousands of miles, even during COVID. Yeah. So this will be welcome news for the people who use it in Asia. And I didn't mention the article if they were going to ship these to like Europe and stuff, but anyways, more capacity, more output is always a good thing.
Exactly. So next up, Panasonic plans to deploy the Tesla 4680 cells into production later this year. And in fact, it said sometime after April 1st is the later this year. So not that far away that they could potentially start producing these or trying to produce these. This story is kind of key because Elon's been saying all along, he got misinterpreted during Battery Day. And when people were understanding that Tesla was going to start manufacturing their own batteries, people initially assumed that Tesla was going to go it alone and start phasing out people like Panasonic and their partners. And Elon's been saying since then, no, we want to double down with all of our partners and bring more people on because we need more and more batteries. This is not about replacing, it's about adding to. And this story is like Elon's not lying, because here it is. It's like, here's Panasonic at Gigafactory, Nevada, is going to be doing this. They're going to be producing this there. So it's like, this is them starting to transition and ramp this whole production up, which just goes to show that later this year, that's probably what's going to be like being used in the new Tesla Model S's that are going to be coming out for the Plaid Plus. It's like, it's going to be coming out of places like this. So it's not necessarily all what Tesla's creating on their own. So this is pretty cool news.
Yeah. this is, I don't think, I didn't think about this. I actually didn't know if this was going to be the case. I kind of thought they would just keep rolling 2170s in Sparks, Nevada, Gigafactory, and maybe move this. But this is a huge deal. It really just pushes forward timelines on some of the products that they were going to make. So when I saw the Plaid Plus numbers and how they would ship them later in the year, whereas the Model S Plaid is shipping like in a month, I knew this battery was the reason for that. Mm-hmm. And if we're talking about building these in the first Gigafactory, that's huge news. Part of why I think this is really exciting is just their foresight into how they built the Gigafactory. The Gigafactory in Nevada is not fully completed, but what they've done is they've built it in a modular way that as they build on it, each like module is self-sustaining. It can build a battery unit. And then when you have two of them, it can build twice as many. And when you build three of them, it can build 3 times as many. It isn't like typical factories are built to be, we have this booth here, we have this over here, we have that over there. It's not easy to just take them. They're not fully contained, I guess I will say. And these are. So imagine if they have these different business units that keep doing 2170s and then 2 new little sub-modules that do the 4680s. They have the infrastructure and how they've built these lines in place to be able to do that. Really exciting. Thank you, Bill O'Barr, for the super chat. He mentions he says, looks like Berlin and Austin may open earlier than projected. What do you think? I think they will. And that's actually a video I was thinking about doing. Let us know in the comments if maybe Matt and I should both do it. But about how they build their factories, it's pretty interesting, their approach. They're building at breakneck speeds in a lot of cases. I did some early research, and it looks like 2 years is what a lot of companies are taking to build factories, and Tesla's doing it in less than 1. So cool stuff and really exciting news. I think for anybody who's trying to get a Cybertruck, this is very welcome news, knowing that Panasonic is going to be making these batteries.
And the whole thing about it, Tesla's actually gotten much better at not overselling what they can actually do. They're under-promising and over-delivering now. Elon time where he would be like, oh, we'll have that in 6 months. And then a year later, they finally get it. They finally have learned how to manage expectations. And they're constantly saying, oh, this should be online by this date. And they keep beating those estimates. So they're getting much better at using conservative estimates when they're talking about when these factories will open or when a car will be ready for delivery. I love that. I love seeing them under promise and over delivering. So I hope they keep doing it.
That's been their MO since Model 3 timeline hells. The only exception I think of is FSD, which I think is so long running that should we just let's just call that one example of under delivering and move it aside. But everything else they've been doing a good job with.
Yeah. So next up,
first pictures of the Volkswagen ID.6 electric SUV. And for anybody who is looking for this kind of a car, people who are kind of maybe hoping the Model X would be a little bit bigger, this might be your SUV. There's no mention of a third row, which is the first thing I was a little bit bummed out about. But look at the pictures. It looks like a pretty good looking car, very much in keeping with the ID.3 and ID.4, and that's because it'll be built on the MEB platform, just like the others. It looks like maybe the wheelbase will be stretched out behind the rear wheel, maybe a little bit more than the other ones, but yeah, I'm not sure if the wheelbase is actually stretched out, if the platform has that capability or functionality, but there's probably a little more of an overhang off the back. Curious if they're going to, like the timelines and when they'll be built. I'd imagine China, the US, North America would be big markets for a car like this. If the ID.4 is going to be a big hit here, I think the ID.6 would be even bigger. So this is a look at what happens when you invest in like a vehicle architecture and you actually are serious about building EVs. The rate at which new models are introduced is pretty rapid. You don't have to go back to the drawing board for the new chassis every single time.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what your take is on the looks, but I'll say I like the Volkswagen look. I don't love it. I love my Tesla. I love the way that my car looks. These aren't offensive designs, but I don't feel that like, wow, I really want to go out and get one kind of a vibe. What do you think?
I'm probably a little more pro on that than you. I do think they're handsome cars. They're not gorgeous cars. But like, inoffensive would be a good way to put it, but I actually think they look pretty nice. And it's like, I think they're going to resonate with a lot of people, where Teslas are gorgeous, but they're also a little more opinionated in their design, which can turn some people off. Like a lot of people don't like that very Spartan interior at all, where the insides of the VW cars, they look like a traditional car inside just with a lot of screens. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people that just are drawn to that style of car. But they're very modern. They're very, nice. I have no problems with them. I just think they're nice, kind of handsome cars.
That's probably a good way to put it. Yeah. It doesn't feel like they're sabotaging it like I felt BMW did for a long time. Like BMW went out of their way to make just hideous cars.
The ID3 is an ugly car. I can't stand that car.
The BMW?
Yeah, the BMW.
Yeah. No kidding. i3s. Yeah. I don't know what they were thinking, but they were kind of getting their head around it too. But we're now at the point where if you think back to Model 3, honestly, if you talk to your friends, how many of them are ready for an electric car? I would argue maybe 1 in 10 or 15. Now I feel like everybody's ready and they're just waiting for that right model to show up. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are thinking about maybe the Rivian R1S, which is one of my favorite ones. It's like the little electric Range Rover to me. I think I'd love that one. And now they have this, maybe something bigger from Hyundai and Apple's partnership or something. I mean, in a couple of years, we might have tons and tons of options. And I know you mentioned this, that there's way more in Europe than we have here, but let's hope some of the stuff, also they're sandbagging, they get it ahead of time. Maybe this car is ready in a year or two as well.
I think you brought up a really good point with when you have a platform, it means the iteration and rolling them out speeds up as you go. I think that's what we're going to see out of both GM and VW. We're going to see kind of a slow beginning, and then it's going to suddenly ramp up really fast, which is exciting because we need more options on the market. Thanks so much for watching and listening. And if you think we've earned it, be sure to subscribe and watch us every Thursday night. We broadcast live at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, or listen on the go by subscribing to the podcast at viceversa.show. And it would also be really helpful if you could give the podcast a rating and review on the podcast platform of your choice, because it really does help. Thanks again to everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.